Moving to Portland felt like stepping into a fog I couldn't quite see through. 2 weeks ago, I'd packed my life into a beaten-up Honda Civic, left behind my small Washington town and the safety of my mother's voice echoing down the hallway. Now my apartment smelled faintly of paint and cardboard, the floor creaking underfoot like a protest every time I shifted my weight. My neighbors were strangers. My friends back home were just faces on a screen, and the city hummed a constant undertone of motion I wasn't yet used to. That Friday afternoon, gray clouds hung low, a drizzle streaking the windows of the narrow streets. I needed a break from unpacking, cleaning wipes, instant noodles, and maybe a pumpkin spice coffee from the 7-Eleven 3 blocks away sounded like enough distraction. I grabbed my hoodie, tucked my keys into my pocket, and stepped into the drizzle, the smell of wet asphalt mingling with the faint scent of roasted coffee from a nearby cafe. The bell above the 7-Eleven door chimed when I entered. Fluorescent lights flickered faintly, buzzing overhead, casting harsh strips of white on the linoleum floor. The smell of stale coffee and freezer air hit me like a wave, comforting in a weird, familiar way. I moved toward the cleaning aisle, glancing at the magazines near the entrance. That's when I noticed him. A man leaned against the rack, red flannel and mariner's cap pulled low, eyes shadowed but fixed. He didn't move, didn't shop, just stared. My gut tensed. I told myself it was nothing. City life. People stare sometimes. But as I turned to grab wipes, I caught his reflection in the glass freezer beside me. He was there still, hands in pockets, eyes following me. My stomach knotted, a cold line tracing my spine. I forced my voice steady. "Excuse me." He blinked slowly. A crooked smile. Nothing else. My hands tightened around the basket handle. By the time I reached the counter, my heart was racing. "There's a man following me," I whispered to the young cashier, Jordan, who was stocking gum nearby. His expression shifted instantly. He called another employee over, quietly keeping me near the register while I pretended to scroll through my phone. The man lingered in the snack aisle, pretending to read jerky labels. When Jordan glanced at him, he slowly paced toward the door, bell chiming behind him. Gone. I breathed out a shaky sigh, but as I stepped into the drizzle outside, relief was fleeting. From the corner of my eye, far down the street, I thought I saw a red flannel sleeve under the streetlight. My hand gripped the steering wheel of my silver Corolla like it might disappear if I loosened it. I drove in loops, wrong turns, until I convinced myself I was not being followed. That night, lying on the couch, pepper spray clutched in my palm, I realized I had already started seeing shadows in every corner. The hum of my fridge sounded sinister, every outside sound amplified. City life was loud, and loneliness made it louder. Over the next few days, I tried to ignore the incident, focusing on unpacking and settling into routines. But my vigilance had changed. Every time I left my apartment, I scanned the street, counting the steps from my door to my car, noting reflections in the dark windows of businesses I passed. Thursday morning, I ran out to pick up groceries. It was bright, overcast but dry. The 7-Eleven was the same, fluorescent and buzzing, the smell of coffee and burnt donuts filling the air. And there he was again. Same red flannel, same cap, leaning against the entrance. My stomach clenched. This time, I didn't convince myself it was nothing. I took my basket and walked quickly toward the cleaning aisle. He mirrored me, slow, calculated. My hands shook as I selected disinfectant wipes. I turned, pretending to adjust my sleeve, and caught him glancing through the reflection of the freezer again. My voice cracked when I whispered to Jordan at the counter, "It's him. He's back." Jordan didn't hesitate. He signaled another employee, keeping me near the front as they pretended to help with a display. I caught the man pacing near the drink coolers, idle hands twitching near his jacket pocket. He didn't try anything yet, but it wasn't idle curiosity. It was a test, a measurement of my reaction, my boundaries. When he finally left, stepping past the door into the street, I didn't breathe until I got into my car. But then, driving home, headlights reflected in the puddles on wet asphalt. I saw it again. Red flannel, standing still under a streetlight, watching. My chest felt hollow. I realized I had to do more than avoid him. I couldn't stay frozen in fear. I researched the Portland police online, learned about stalking reports, and filled out a form describing everything: time, appearance, behavior. They said they'd keep a record, but no one could promise he wouldn't come back. The fear began to seep into daily life. I started carrying my pepper spray openly, checking parking lots before leaving the car, even installing a small motion-sensitive light at the front of my building. Friends back home called, but I downplayed the anxiety, afraid of sounding paranoid. One evening around 9 p.m., I went out for a late snack run. The streets were quieter, damp from earlier rain. I parked at the corner 7-Eleven, hood up, eyes scanning. Sure enough, he was there again, leaning against the bus stop across the street, unmoving. My chest seized, adrenaline burning sharp and bright. I didn't enter immediately. I waited, watching patterns in his posture, the way he tilted his head slightly when a car drove by. I realized this had been going on long before me. This wasn't random. It was practice, and I was the latest subject. Inside, I walked quickly, basket in hand, every instinct screaming. He didn't follow this time. But when I returned to my car, I noticed muddy footprints near the curb, distinctive, stopping at my driver's door. Fear surged. I drove home slowly, heart hammering, realizing that vigilance had to be constant, and that city isolation had amplified my vulnerability. A week later, I went to the police station in person. Officer Marquez listened carefully, taking notes while I recounted every encounter, every detail. "You did the right thing," she said. "It's serious, and we'll monitor." She suggested installing security cameras and offered a patrol escort if I felt unsafe. That evening, I returned to the street near the 7-Eleven, pepper spray in pocket, phone ready. I spotted him under the streetlight, cap low, hands in pockets. Heart hammering, I approached slowly, calling out, "Hey!" He froze, then raised his hand slightly. "Nothing wrong," he said, voice calm. "Just walking." "I've called the police," I said firmly, taking a step closer. "You need to leave me alone. Now." His face twitched briefly. He muttered something under his breath, indecipherable, and started walking down the side street. I followed at a distance until he turned and disappeared. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept with less tension. The police promised patrols near the area, and I finally felt a measure of control over the situation. The next 2 weeks were tense but manageable. I avoided unnecessary trips after dark, always carried my pepper spray, and installed a small dash camera in my car. I made friends in my apartment building, neighbors who kept an eye on each other's comings and goings. Eventually, the sighting stopped. He never returned to the corner, the bus stop, or the 7-Eleven. I resumed short walks, coffee runs, and even small errands alone. But with awareness, a practiced vigilance that was no longer fear, just precaution. Sometimes when the rain streaks glass or a red flannel flits in my peripheral vision, I remember the weeks of dread and paranoia, but I don't freeze anymore. I respond, I act, and I trust my instincts. The city is big, streets are crowded, and people are strangers. But I've learned that awareness, preparation, and self-trust can carve safety from fear. I move forward cautiously, eyes open, heart steady, and in that cautiousness, I've reclaimed a piece of freedom. Life in the city can be isolating, and danger sometimes hides in plain sight. Safety isn't guaranteed by familiarity or daylight. It's maintained by vigilance, trust in instincts, and preparedness. At the same time, isolation can amplify fear, making ordinary spaces feel threatening. Stay aware, act decisively when something feels wrong, and build community where possible. Fear is natural, but it shouldn't control you. Action, not panic, is the strongest safeguard. I never thought I'd work nights. At 19, the idea of staying awake when the world sleeps sounded like punishment, not a job. But life has a way of twisting things you think you control. I graduated high school last year and had a few odd jobs, but nothing permanent. When the local 7-Eleven needed someone to cover the graveyard shift, I jumped on it. The pay was decent for a small town, and it gave me time to think, to escape my parents' nagging questions about my future. The store sat on the edge of Highway 19, a lone structure surrounded by endless Kansas fields. Frost coated the grass in winter, making the world outside seem frozen in silence. A single flickering sign above the roof hummed constantly, a beacon for the rare late-night traveler. Inside, fluorescent lights shone so bright they almost hurt my eyes. The smell of coffee, old carpet, and the faint scent of gasoline coming through the sliding doors welcomed me each night. Ralph had been my co-worker for the past month, a gruff older guy with stories about the highway he loved to tell. He quit 3 days ago without warning, leaving me alone on the night shift. I didn't mind the silence, nights were simpler. I could hum along to the radio, restock shelves, and sip bitter coffee while customers came and went like ghosts. It was 1:12 a.m. when the headlights appeared. The truck barreled into the lot, mud spattering across the icy asphalt. It stopped abruptly near Pump 7, engine idling. I straightened my back, wiping a counter streaked with syrup and fingerprints. The driver's door creaked open. The man who stepped out was large, broad-shouldered, with a streaked gray beard and eyes that glinted unnaturally in the fluorescent glare. His boots crunched against the frost-hardened pavement. "Evenin'," I called, trying for a casual tone. The man didn't answer. He walked straight to the counter, unblinking. "You work here?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. Yeah. What can I get you?" I said, trying not to sound nervous. "Ralph?" he asked. "No, sir. Ralph quit last week." My stomach tightened. The man's lips twisted, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Tell him I came looking. I want the cat. In the bag." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard correctly. "Sir, I think you've got the wrong place. We don't sell pets here." His smile vanished. He turned and walked back to his truck, leaving the night and the wind behind him. My pulse was still racing when I went back to restocking. 20 minutes later, the truck returned, sliding to a stop in the same spot. This time, the man moved slower, heavier, wet from the cold. The smell of gasoline clung to him, sharp and acrid. "Where's Ralph?" he rasped, voice cracking. "Sir, I told you." He flicked a lighter, producing a tiny flame. My heart leapt into my throat. Please don't do that. I can call someone, okay?" His scream tore through the night. "Ralph, you think you can hide from me?" In a split second, the flame ignited the man. The fire engulfed him before I could even think. I bolted outside, dialing 911, gasping for air. The smell of burning gasoline and flesh clung to my skin. The night had changed, and I could feel it. Even after the police left, the world never felt the same. The lot smelled faintly of burnt fuel for days, and every time I closed my eyes, I could see that man, fire consuming him, screaming. I thought about Ralph, where he'd gone, why this man wanted him. No one had answers. A week later, his trailer was found empty. I tried to go back to normal. Nights at 7-Eleven were routine. Stocking, cleaning, brewing coffee, ringing up the occasional wanderer. But the silence had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was sharp, like a knife against my ears. Every creak of the fridge or click of the automatic doors made me jump. The locals noticed. A few asked why I looked so pale and jittery. I told them too many nights, not enough sleep, and they nodded, thinking that explained everything. But it wasn't just tiredness. It was the way the highway seemed darker, lonelier, the way the air smelled faintly of gasoline even when the trucks weren't there. I couldn't stop thinking about what I saw. A man consumed by fire. My brain kept asking the same question over and over. Why Ralph? Why the cat in the bag? The words haunted me, nonsensical yet menacing. One night around 2 a.m., I looked up from mopping the linoleum. Near Pump 7, I thought I saw movement, a shimmer in the glass. No truck, no sound, just a vague human shape standing. I blinked. Gone. I started locking the store doors even though it wasn't policy. I double-checked the cameras, rewound tapes for hours. Nothing. Yet the sense of being watched never left. It was another quiet night when the man appeared again, or at least I thought he did. I was stacking snacks when I heard the sliding doors open. A chill ran down my spine. No sound outside, just the faint scraping of boots across asphalt. "Hello?" I called. No answer. The man never spoke again that night. But small things started happening. Items misplaced, coffee cups tipped over, the smell of gasoline lingering near the cooler. I questioned myself constantly. Was I imagining it? Was my brain unraveling from lack of sleep? Then came the note. A small slip of paper slipped under the door. It read, simply, "Tell him I'm coming back." No signature, no explanation. I froze. I called the police. They came, searched the perimeter, and found nothing. The next week passed in a blur. I avoided the highway outside, walked the long way from the back entrance, kept my phone close. The threat was invisible but real. One Friday around 1:30 a.m., I heard a truck again. My stomach knotted. The man stepped into the store, soaked and reeking of fuel. He looked at me silent, then moved toward the back shelves. "Sir, don't!" I shouted. He didn't respond. I grabbed the closest fire extinguisher, shaking. "Leave now, I'll call the cops." He paused, glanced at the extinguisher, and for the first time his eyes widened. Not with anger, but fear. Something in the world had changed. Maybe he realized the night wasn't as empty as it seemed. I don't know what made him run. Maybe the fear of witnesses, maybe the instinct to survive. But he left, disappearing into the night again. The next day, the lot looked untouched, normal, but the scar remained in my mind. Months passed. Ralph never returned. I stayed at 7-Eleven out of necessity. Bills didn't wait for fear. But the night shift was no longer peaceful. Every small noise made my hands twitch, every dark reflection a potential threat. I learned to respect silence, to never assume it meant safety. I watched the highway with new caution, always alert. Sometimes, when I cleaned the windows, I thought I saw a shape by pump 7. Nothing solid, just a suggestion of something watching. It's a lesson I carry to this day. Life has its quiet hours. Yes, but danger can hide in plain sight. The world doesn't always warn you, and sometimes the people you think are gone are closer than you realize. Life's dangers aren't always obvious. Silence and routine can lull us into false security, but vigilance, caution, and respect for the unexpected are what keep us safe. Trust is precious, but awareness is survival. I've been a nurse for more than a decade, but some days still leave me feeling like I've run a marathon without ever leaving the parking lot. Thursday had been one of those days. The community clinic where I worked is small, understaffed, and always swamped with patients' complaints and emergencies that never seem to end. My twin daughters, Mara and Lila, are 12 and 10, and they come home with a constant buzz of energy that seems to mock my exhaustion. When I finally clocked out, my shoulders ached, my hair was pulled into a messy bun, and I could feel every muscle in my back reminding me how long I'd been on my feet. I promised the girls a small treat if they could survive midterms without losing their minds. They had been bouncing with energy all day, whispering and giggling in the back seat as I drove toward Broadview Heights. The corner 7-Eleven was familiar. I'd stopped there dozens of times over the past few years for milk, snacks, or the occasional impulsive ice cream. It sat quietly on a suburban corner, tucked between a small park and a row of townhomes. The neon "Open 24 Hours" sign flickered every few seconds, casting uneven red light across the lot. Wet asphalt reflected the glow of streetlights and the sign, giving the place a kind of surreal, almost theatrical quality. As we stepped inside, the familiar hum of fluorescent lights, the faint smell of coffee mixed with cleaning solution, and the soft jingling of the door chime greeted us. Mara and Lila ran to the candy aisle, whispering and giggling while I drifted down the stationery section, scanning shelves for pencils, notebooks, and a small treat for each of them. I noticed him before I realized I was noticing anyone at all. A man with dark, unkempt hair leaned near the slushy machine. He wasn't browsing. He wasn't pretending to pick anything up, he just stood there staring. The kind of stare that makes your stomach drop, like a weight pressing down on your chest. And then I noticed it. His gaze wasn't on me. It was on Mara and Lila. I froze for a moment, telling myself I was imagining things. "Mom," Mara whispered, tugging at my sleeve. "That man, he's been behind us since we came in." I glanced at the man, then quickly scanned the store. My pulse sped up. She was right. He had moved subtly, almost imperceptibly, following us from aisle to aisle, keeping a calculated distance. Trying to calm myself, I whispered, "Let's finish quickly and get to the counter." I kept my tone light, though my heart was racing, and then I saw them. 2 more men. One leaned against the magazine rack, flipping pages without reading. Another lingered near the snack aisle. Both eyes flicked constantly toward my daughters. My pulse jumped. This wasn't random, not at all. "Mom, I don't like this," Lila whispered, clutching my hand tightly. I forced a smile I didn't feel. "We'll be okay. Just stay close. Don't talk to anyone else." I moved toward the counter, keeping my daughters close. The cashier, a young man named Derek, noticed my anxious pace. His eyes flicked up from the register. "Everything all right?" he asked, voice soft, polite. I leaned toward him, keeping my voice low. "I think we need someone to escort us out. There are men following us." His eyes widened slightly, and without hesitation, he pressed a button under the counter. A moment later, another employee, a tall woman named Sonia, appeared from the back. She positioned herself discreetly at my side. I could feel Mara and Lila trembling against me, their small hands clutching mine so tightly it hurt. The 3 men lingered out of reach, watching us. One shifted near the frozen pizza aisle. I could feel his gaze burning across the store, unrelenting. I realized how little control I had in this place, how ordinary and mundane this corner store had become, a stage for something dark. "Let's just get to the door," I whispered to my daughters. My voice was tight, controlled. They nodded, silent. Every step felt deliberate, measured, as though we were moving through a minefield. When we reached the automatic doors, I could see one of the men outside under the flickering neon, unmoving. His eyes followed us as we stepped into the soft glow of the streetlights. The moment we turned the corner toward the main road, he was gone. My hands shook as I fumbled for the car keys. We drove home in silence. The girls kept glancing at me, eyes wide, waiting for reassurance I didn't have. At home, I bolted the door, set the alarm, and sat on the couch with them. I tried to explain that sometimes people are unpredictable, that some dangers aren't loud, obvious, or logical. I lay awake for hours that night. Every small sound, the hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock, branches tapping against the windows made me flinch. I replayed the stairs, the coordinated movements, the way my daughter's hands had felt small and fragile in mine. Weeks passed. I returned to the store on errands, sometimes alone. Every time I scanned the aisles, noting shadows and reflections. Every glance over my shoulder made my heart jump. Sometimes I thought I saw someone watching, just standing there, waiting. At home, I became hyper-aware. I installed additional locks, added motion sensor lights, and reminded the girls to call me whenever they left the house, no matter how small the errand. The world that had once felt safe now felt unpredictable, like a stage with hidden actors. The police had checked the store after my initial report. They found nothing unusual, no prior complaints, no suspicious individuals on camera, but the feeling didn't leave me. I began carrying a small flashlight and pepper spray in my purse, walking with deliberate awareness. The feeling that eyes followed us never quite left. One evening, after running errands alone, I noticed a man standing outside the same 7-Eleven. He lingered, half hidden under the flickering neon. I recognized the posture, the calculated stillness. Panic rose in my chest. I crossed the street deliberately, keeping my back to the road, eyes on him. He didn't follow. He waited until I disappeared from view, then vanished himself. My body shook for hours afterward. I realized fear wasn't just a response to immediate danger. It was a shadow that clung to you, shaping your steps, your thoughts, your quiet hours. Months later, life settled into a cautious routine. I still shop, still take my daughters out, still laugh at their jokes and small triumphs. But the sense of safety is never complete. Every shadow makes me pause. Every stranger's glance carries weight. I've learned to balance vigilance with normalcy, teaching Mara and Lila the importance of awareness without paralyzing fear. I learned that ordinary errands, mundane routines, and familiar places can hide threats. Danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it is subtle, silent, and patient. And sometimes, the only thing standing between safety and harm is alertness, quick thinking, and instinct. Safety is not guaranteed by familiar surroundings. Awareness, preparedness, and trust in your instincts are crucial. Ordinary life can hide extraordinary danger, and vigilance is the quiet guardian that keeps you and those you love safe. I never thought working at a 7-Eleven would make me feel like I was in a war zone. But when Marcus, my manager, handed me a clipboard and said, "Ethan, you're going to start handling loss prevention tonight," I realized this wasn't about coffee or slushies anymore. I'm Ethan Caldwell, 24, born and raised in Cedar Falls, Iowa. I'd worked at the store for 3 years, mostly stocking shelves and cleaning up after night shift customers. The job was simple, predictable, and safe. Until Marcus decided I was ready for the more intense work. Loss prevention sounded straightforward. Watch for people taking things without paying. Catch them before they leave. Write a report. Easy, right? But Marcus drilled into me. It's not about catching a guy with a pack of gum. You're watching patterns, watching behavior. If something feels off, trust it. Don't let them see you panic. You act weak, they notice. You act strong, you control the situation. I nodded, thinking I understood. I really thought I did. That Thursday evening, November the 2nd, 2023, the store was moderately busy. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly, as if warning me something was off. I wandered between aisles, clipboard in hand, pretending to restock chips while scanning customers. My heart rate was steady at first. I'd handled shoplifters before, mostly teens trying to swipe candy. I could do this. And then I saw her. She moved into the drinks aisle on a mobility scooter, wrapped in bulky sweaters layered over one another, hair pulled tight back into a bun, eyes twitching. The kind of twitch that makes you think someone's noticing more than you want them to. And she was staring at me. Not once, not casually, but directly, like she could see into my chest. My stomach flipped. Stay calm. Don't stare back. Just observe. I told myself. But instinctively, I followed. Aisle after aisle, she moved. I didn't make it obvious, weaving between shelves, pretending to check stock. But I couldn't shake the feeling she was aware of every movement I made, reading my body language like it was an open book. Then her eyes flared, sharp, dangerous. "What are you looking at?" she hissed. Her voice was low, rough, not loud enough for anyone else to hear, but sharp enough to make me freeze. Stay calm. Don't panic. My mind repeated the mantra like a lifeline. I was still adjusting my posture when the scooter rammed me in the legs. I stumbled back, gripping a shelf to keep my balance. It wasn't slow. It wasn't hesitant. It felt like a collision with a moving wall. "Stop," I shouted instinctively, but my voice sounded tinny in the empty corner. "Police are coming." Her strength was unnatural. She lunged at me, fists flailing. I barely managed to push her away, though every hit made me flinch. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Every instinct screamed to run, to get away, but I couldn't leave the store. Not yet. Not while she was loose in the aisles. A customer glanced over from the candy aisle, wide-eyed. The young cashier froze, phone in hand. I grabbed the nearest mop handle like a weapon, though I knew it wouldn't help much. My hands trembled, adrenaline making them unsteady. She moved with surprising agility for someone in a scooter. She twisted, rammed, hit, growled, a sound that was almost animal. I ducked behind a rack, barely avoiding another strike. My notebook slipped from my hands. My pen rolled under a display of chips. I cursed under my breath, panic sharpening every nerve. Finally, I lunged forward, pinning her to the floor with all my weight. Her eyes burned into mine, glowing with something that wasn't human. She hissed, "You'll see me again." And then the 911 operator was on the line, and minutes later, the store doors burst open with the sound of sirens and flashing lights. Relief was immediate, but the metallic tang of fear lingered in my nose, thick and clinging. The authorities restrained her, uncovering small stolen items beneath her sweaters. Candy bars, pocket toiletries, miscellaneous merchandise. It seemed petty, but the ferocity in her eyes told me this wasn't about the items. I sat on the aisle chair, shaking, trying to slow my breathing. Marcus hovered, trying to offer words I couldn't hear. "You did fine," he said. But I didn't feel fine. Weeks passed, but the memory haunted me. Every shift, every customer, I found myself scanning the aisles more carefully. Someone lingering, someone looking too long. My pulse picked up before I even recognized the danger. Shadows lengthened in the flicker of the lights. Even the humming of the refrigerators felt like it could hide a predator. I started keeping my phone in my hand, eyes darting to every reflection in glass doors. I'd check the parking lot from the front window every few minutes, a habit I couldn't shake. The scooter incident had taught me something I hadn't expected. That fear doesn't end when the person is gone. It lingers. It claws at you in quiet moments. Months later, I returned to a routine. I convinced myself I was over it. But that illusion broke the night a man with a gray hoodie moved a little too deliberately near the chips aisle. My hands clenched around the clipboard. My heartbeat doubled. I realized fear had rewritten the rules. I wasn't just watching for shoplifters anymore. I was watching for predators. People who could slip behind the mask of ordinary life and strike when least expected. The scooter woman had changed the way I saw the world. I couldn't relax the same way walking to my car at night. Every empty lot, every quiet street, carried the shadow of that night. And every time I convinced myself I was safe, my brain reminded me that danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's silent. Sometimes it waits, studying you, calculating. Eventually, I accepted the truth. I would never be the same. Not because of the physical danger that passed, but because of the awareness she forced upon me. I learned to trust my instincts, to respect that small voice in my chest that whispers, "Pay attention." Even now, years later, I still notice the slight twitch in someone's eye, the too intense stare, the way someone grips a cart or leans against a shelf. That voice saved me once, and I know it can save me again. The store became normal again only in appearance. Inside, I was changed. Cautious, alert, alive in ways I hadn't needed to be before. That's the world I live in now, aware, prepared, and never underestimating ordinary appearances. Danger doesn't always look dangerous. It doesn't roar. It doesn't brandish itself. Often it wears ordinary faces, moves quietly, and strikes where you least expect it. Trust your instincts, respect your intuition, and always stay aware. Fear can be a tool, not just a trap. It can keep you alive when the world seems calm, but isn't. If you've ever worked nights, you know how the world feels different after midnight. The streets go quiet, the air gets heavier, and the people who are still awake seem to move slower, as if they're carrying the weight of every hour you've missed asleep. I'd been living that life for almost 2 years, working warehouse shifts outside Brookdale, Oregon, hauling pallets and loading trucks until my back ached and my hands stung from cold steel. My name's Julian Reyes, 26, tired most days, but steady. The one constant in my routine was the 7-Eleven on Pine Street. It sat wedged between an old laundromat and a worn-down apartment complex where the lights always flickered. Every night around 11:15, I'd stop there for a soda, a burrito, sometimes just to sit for a minute in the glow of the refrigerators before driving home. It wasn't much, but it was something predictable in a world that kept shifting around me. That night, Friday, October 27th, 2023, rain came down in a slow drizzle, the kind that made the pavement glisten under the orange streetlights. I parked my car in the same spot I always did, right under the buzzing sign that read, "Open 24 hours," and jogged inside with my hood pulled up. The smell of cleaning spray and pizza hit me right away. The clerk on duty, some kid who looked barely old enough to drive, was stacking candy bars behind the counter. I texted Maya, my girlfriend. "Almost home. Grabbing a drink." She replied with a heart emoji. We'd been together a year, long distance mostly, but we talked every night. Those texts made the nights less lonely. I grabbed a cherry soda and a bag of chips, leaned against the cooler and checked my phone again. That's when I noticed him. Tall guy in a gray hoodie, standing near the snack aisle. He wasn't shopping. He was watching me. At first I ignored it. Cities have weird people. You learn to brush it off. But every time I moved, so did he. Same pace, same direction. My stomach tightened. I sent Maya another text. Some guy keeps watching me. Probably nothing. When I turned around again, he was closer. He stepped toward me, his sneakers squeaking on the wet tile. "You mind stopping right there?" he said. His voice was sharp, clipped. Do I know you?" I asked. He smirked. "You can cut the act. I'm with loss prevention. You've been stealing from this location for weeks." I froze. "What? No, you've got the wrong guy." Before I could say anything else, 2 other men came out from the next aisle, one in a baseball cap, the other dripping from the rain outside. They moved fast, practiced. The one in the cap grabbed my wrist hard. "Hey!" I shouted. "What the hell are you doing?" "Don't resist, Victor," the first guy snapped. "You're under investigation." "Victor?" I said, stunned. "My name's Julian. Julian Reyes." The clerk looked up, confused. You guys cops or something?" None of them answered. They were dragging me toward the door now, my bag of chips falling to the floor. My heart hammered in my chest. One of them flashed something like a badge, but I barely saw it before he shoved me outside. Rain hit my face as they pinned me against my car. One of them yanked my arms behind my back and snapped on handcuffs so tight they burned my skin. I shouted, begged them to check my wallet, my ID, my phone. "I didn't steal anything. Look at the cameras." The man in the hoodie leaned close. His breath smelled like cigarettes. "You're Victor Dahlin. Stop lying." The name meant nothing to me. The fear did. They kept me there for over an hour, in the cold rain, questioning me like I was some kind of criminal. I told them about my job, showed them my work badge, my license, even a picture of me and Maya on my phone, but they didn't care. The whole time, people came and went from the store, customers grabbing snacks, giving me quick, judgmental glances. The clerk tried calling his manager, then the police. The men just kept talking over him. I'd been humiliated before, working low-pay jobs, dealing with rude supervisors, but nothing like this. The way they looked at me like I was already guilty made me feel small, powerless. When the police finally showed up, the whole situation turned chaotic. The officers listened to the men first. Only when I kept insisting, begging that they check the security footage did things start to unravel. One officer went inside, came back 5 minutes later, shaking his head. "This guy's clean," he said. "Not the same man. The suspect on file has tattoos. He doesn't." The fake loss prevention team went pale. The one in the hoodie muttered, "He matched the description." "Description?" I yelled. "You broke my wrist over a description?" They uncuffed me without apology. The police took statements, but the men were gone before I even realized it. I was left sitting on the curb, drenched, my hands trembling, wrists red and raw. When I finally got home, Maya was waiting at my apartment door. Her eyes widened when she saw me, wet, shaking, hollow. She held me like I was something fragile. I didn't have words, just silence, the kind that sits heavy in your chest and never leaves. For days I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me flinch. The slam of a car door, footsteps outside, even the ding of my phone. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, the phantom feeling of cuffs still burning my wrists. Maya stayed over most nights just so I wouldn't have to be alone. "You should file a complaint," she kept saying. "They can't just get away with that." I tried. The police said the men weren't real loss prevention, just private security from another company, subcontracted and already under investigation. Their words sounded rehearsed. Empty. They offered no apology. No closure. I stopped going to that 7-Eleven. Hell, I stopped going anywhere after dark. The grocery store, the gas station, even parking garages, they all made my pulse quicken. I hated it. I used to think I was unshakable, but that night stripped something from me. Not just trust in strangers, but trust in the idea that good people get treated fairly. One evening, Maya found me sitting in the car outside a new convenience store. "You okay?" she asked. I stared at the lights inside, that same flickering hum. "I just can't go in," I said. "Feels like I'm walking into a trap." She nodded, took my hand. "You don't have to. Not tonight." It took me 3 weeks to step foot inside that 7-Eleven again. I told myself it was just a building, fluorescent lights, coffee machines, junk food. But when I pushed open that glass door, my heart still pounded. The same clerk was there. He looked up, surprised. "Hey, man. I remember you. That night was messed up." "Yeah," I said quietly. "Guess I needed to face it." He nodded slowly. "Those guys got fired, you know. One of them got arrested for false detainment. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. I bought a soda, paid in cash, and stood there for a moment, listening to the hum of the coolers. Same sound. Same smell. But I was different now. As I stepped back out into the drizzle, I realized the world hadn't changed. It was me. I still believed most people were decent, but I'd learned the hard way that decency doesn't always protect you. Sometimes bad things just find you for no reason at all. And sometimes, even when the cuffs come off, a part of you never feels free again. We live in a world where assumptions can destroy lives in seconds. Mistaken identity isn't just a legal term. It's a reminder that judgment, fear, and power can collide to make innocent people suffer. Always look twice, listen carefully, and never let the noise of authority drown out the truth. I've always said there's something strange about the desert at night. The world feels wider out there, emptier, like the darkness has no end and no bottom. I used to like that feeling. The silence, the hum of the road beneath the tires, the kind of peace that comes when you're the only one awake for miles. But after that night, I stopped loving the quiet. Silence became something else, something that could hide anything. My name's Jason Cole. I'm 36. A Marine veteran who spent most of his 20s sweating through sandstorms overseas, and most of his 30s trying to convince myself that civilian life made sense. These days, I do private security work. It's not glamorous, mostly guarding half-finished construction sites, warehouses, and parking lots. The kind of places people forget exist until something goes wrong. That Monday night had been long. The site was just outside Tucson, a dusty sprawl of concrete skeletons and chain-link fences. I'd been there since 3 p.m., watching the sun drop like a burning coin into the horizon. By the time I clocked out, my throat was dry, my uniform smelled like hot metal, and all I could think about was a cold drink and my own bed. I remember the clock on my dash reading 11:42 p.m. when I pulled into the 7-Eleven on Highway 19. The place sat alone, glowing weakly under a flickering neon sign. A couple of moths batted against the glass doors. The parking lot was empty except for a single dusty pickup that looked abandoned. Inside, the air conditioning blasted against my face like heaven. A kid behind the counter, couldn't have been more than 19, was stacking candy bars near the register. I gave him a nod and headed for the coolers in the back. I grabbed a bottle of water, a soda, and a bag of jerky. Typical night snack. My body still hummed with the leftover alertness that never really left me after the service. That's when I saw him. He was leaning against the wall near the restroom. A man in his 40s, pale, thin, hollow-eyed. His clothes looked slept in, jeans stiff with dirt, and his hands hung limp at his sides. But it wasn't his clothes that got me. It was his eyes. He wasn't browsing. He wasn't waiting in line. He was staring at me. Still, unblinking, like I'd just walked into his nightmare. I nodded politely, tried to ignore it, and made my way to the counter. "Quiet night?" I asked the kid. "Always is," he said, scanning my stuff. "People don't like stopping out here after dark." "Why's that?" I joked. He shrugged. "Desert gets weird sometimes." I paid, thanked him, and stepped back into the thick desert air. The wind had died down. The whole world felt too still. I tossed my stuff in the passenger seat, took a swig of soda, and was about to start the engine when I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. The same man was outside now, standing under the weak glow of the parking lot light. He was closer this time, just far enough that I couldn't read his face clearly, but close enough that I knew he was watching me. I told myself he was harmless. Maybe a drifter. Maybe a guy waiting for a ride. I started the car. That's when he moved. 1 second, the lot was empty. The next, he was at my window, face inches from mine. I didn't even have time to reach for my knife before I felt cold metal press against my ribs. "Drive," he whispered. His voice cracked, dry but sharp. "Don't stop." The blade against my side was small but real. My training kicked in instantly. Slow breathing, calm tone, no sudden moves. I'd seen worse, but never this close to home. "All right," I said, forcing my voice steady. "Where to?" "East," he hissed. "Just drive east." I pulled out of the lot, the headlights slicing through the dark. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I kept my voice calm. "You got a name?" He didn't answer. "Look, man." I tried again. "If it's money you want, shut up and drive." That voice. It wasn't just angry. It was terrified. Shaky. Uncertain. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, trying to read him. He wasn't twitchy like a junkie. He was focused, tense. Sweat slicked his temple, his hand tight around the knife handle. The desert blurred past on both sides, black and endless. The hum of the tires filled the silence. My hands stayed loose on the wheel, even though every instinct screamed to act. Minutes stretched. My throat was dry again. Finally, I said, "You got family out there? Someone waiting?" He blinked. "Doesn't matter. They're gone." "Gone where?" "Don't ask questions, soldier." That hit me hard. "How'd you know I was—" "Doesn't matter," he said again, quieter now. "You all think you can keep it buried. You can't. It always follows." He wasn't just some random drifter. He was unraveling. Whatever this was, it went deeper than a robbery. The GPS light flickered across the dash. We were miles from the nearest exit. Just desert and sky. "Pull over here," he said suddenly. "There's nothing here." Exactly. I slowed, heart pounding. If he wanted to rob me, this was it. If he wanted to kill me, same deal. My fingers brushed the tactical knife clipped inside the door pocket. As soon as the car stopped, I felt him shift. That was my moment. Years of muscle memory came back in an instant. I slammed my left elbow back, catching his wrist. The knife clattered between the seats. He yelled, hoarse, guttural, and lunged again. I kicked open the door, tumbling into the sand as headlights appeared down the highway. A truck. A goddamn miracle. I waved my arms, yelling. The man inside my car screamed something I couldn't make out, then bolted into the darkness beyond the road. The truck screeched to a stop. "You all right, buddy?" the driver shouted, jumping out. I nodded, breathless. "Call 911, there's a guy out there, he's armed." We searched with flashlights, but the desert swallowed him whole. The cops showed up half an hour later. Red and blue lights painted the sand like broken glass. I gave my statement 3 times. Same details, same story. The deputy, a tired-looking woman with sunburned cheeks, took notes carefully. "You're sure he just vanished?" she asked. "Ran into the desert," I said. Didn't even look back. They searched the area for hours. Nothing. No footprints past a few yards. No tire tracks except mine. It was like he'd melted into the night. They found the knife, though. A small folding blade, rusted, handle cracked. I recognized it wasn't standard issue, not military, not new. The deputy bagged it, nodded, and told me to go home. When I finally made it back to my apartment, the adrenaline had worn off, and the fear crept in. The kind that sticks in your throat and keeps your hands shaking long after the danger's past. I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the hum of the fridge and the distant whine of passing cars. My mind kept replaying the man's face, his voice. It always follows. What the hell had he meant? Sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw headlights cutting across empty desert and a pale figure standing just beyond the reach of the beams. A week passed. The police never found him. They called me twice to confirm details, but it was clear they'd moved on. "Probably some drifter hopped a ride east," one said. "Happens out here." But I couldn't move on. I kept driving the same stretch of highway, eyes scanning the desert for any sign. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I just wanted proof that he was real. Then one night I saw something. A flash of light near mile marker 87. A figure standing still on the shoulder, too pale, too motionless to be random. I slowed, pulse hammering. But when I pulled over, there was nothing there. Just wind whispering through the brush and a faint set of footprints leading nowhere. When I got home, my hands were shaking again. I started keeping my gun closer. Checked the locks twice, sometimes 3 times. The desert wasn't supposed to haunt me. I'd fought in places far worse, seen men vanish in sandstorms. But this felt personal, like I'd been marked. A month later, the sheriff's office called. They'd identified fingerprints from the knife. The man's name was Ethan Miles, a former Marine, dishonorably discharged in 2010 after a breakdown during deployment. No address, no living relatives. Last known sighting, 2 days before my attack, panhandling outside Tucson. A fellow Marine. That night I sat at my kitchen table staring at his photo. Same hollow eyes, same vacant stare. I thought about what he'd said. You can't keep it buried. It always follows. Maybe he wasn't threatening me. Maybe he was warning me. The nightmares, the insomnia, the jump at every sound. It wasn't him I feared anymore. It was the reflection, the memory, the part of me that looked at him and saw what happens when the war never really ends. I still drive that road sometimes, always with one eye on the horizon. The desert is quiet again, but some nights when the wind dies, I swear I can hear someone walking out there. Steady, deliberate, unhurried, like a shadow that never stopped following. The real danger isn't always the stranger in the dark. It's the ghosts we carry within ourselves. You can train your body to survive anything, but if you don't make peace with your past, it will find you again in some lonely place, wearing a new face. Fear fades. Trauma echoes. And sometimes the shadows we run from are our own, or... I never thought a routine week at the warehouse could leave me feeling so drained, but here I was, elbows leaning on the kitchen counter, staring at the dull beige walls of our small apartment in Brookdale, Oregon. The fluorescent light above buzzed faintly, matching the hum in my head from running forklifts, checking shipments, and dodging mistakes that weren't mine. Every Thursday night I'd promise myself a break, but Fridays were sacred. That's why Maya and I made the 7-Eleven run. A little escape before reality hit again on Monday. Maya perched on the edge of the counter, her legs swinging as she thumbed through TikTok videos. "You're still thinking about work," she said, not looking up. Her voice had this soft insistence that reminded me why I liked her. She could call me out without making it a fight. This week was hell, I admitted. Inventory errors, missing pallets, a forklift nearly denting the new shipment. It never ends. She set her phone down and leaned forward. "Hey, you survived. And we're going out for snacks. That's better than therapy." She smiled. I returned the smile, feeling a brief flicker of normalcy. By 11:15 we were in my car, heading down the slick streets. Rain had fallen all evening, leaving the asphalt reflective and shimmering under the streetlights. I loved these drives. The quiet, the hum of the engine, the way the city felt empty when everyone else was tucked in at home. We talked about silly stuff, music we'd been listening to, a few coworkers' weird weekend plans, but I felt the tension in my shoulders slowly release. Pulling into the 7-Eleven lot, I noticed the flickering orange neon buzzing like it had a heartbeat. Maya hopped out, shaking a little water off her hoodie. "You pick the aisle first," she said, laughing. I followed, feeling the normal, comforting rhythm of our casual Friday night ritual. I didn't notice him at first, the man in the gray hoodie lurking by the back aisle. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe just an uneasy prickle in my neck. He stood still for too long and my stomach sank. Then he lunged. "Hey, stop!" I barely managed to yell before hands grabbed my shoulders, yanking me backward toward the checkout counter. My legs scrambled for balance, but there were more hands, more men, moving with this coordinated precision that made me freeze. "I'm loss prevention," one barked. "No, you've got the wrong guy." I struggled, trying to pull free. "I'm Julian Reyes, not Victor Dalin." Maya's voice cut through the chaos. "Wait, he's not him. Look, that's my boyfriend." She pulled out her phone, filming, waving her arms. The men ignored her, pushing me forward. The fluorescent lights felt too bright, reflecting off the linoleum and the rows of chips, making everything feel surreal. "Calm down, sir," one said in a clipped professional tone. But calm wasn't in my blood anymore. My pulse hammered in my ears. I felt the cuffs bite into my wrists, the cool metal pressing painfully. People in the store had started recording, faces half amused, half curious. I wanted to scream, but my voice cracked. "I didn't steal anything. I've never even been here before today." One officer's grip was firm on my arm. "We have an ID. You match the description. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The world had gone sideways. I was handcuffed, being shoved toward a fluorescent-lit hell of chips and soda, and everyone watching silently. Maya followed, shouting my name, trying to reason with people who refused to hear it. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. The store manager, the real Victor Dalin, and some paperwork finally cleared my name. I was free. But free felt meaningless. Maya and I walked home in silence, rain still falling around us. My wrists throbbed, my chest ached, and my hands shook uncontrollably. I wanted to cry, scream, and punch something at the same time. At the apartment, I collapsed on the couch. Maya curled beside me, her arm draped over my shoulder. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "They were idiots. That shouldn't have happened." "I know," I murmured, though I didn't feel reassured. My mind replayed every second. The grip on my shoulders, the cuffs, the sneers from people filming. I'd always felt safe in the mundane, in routine, in everyday errands. Now, everything felt like a potential trap. For days, I found myself scanning parking lots before getting out of the car, checking my surroundings like a paranoid reflex. Even the sound of a hoodie in a store aisle made my stomach twist. I couldn't shake the helplessness, the exposure, the sudden realization that the world wasn't always fair. Maya tried to lighten things. "Hey, at least you've got a story for life now," she joked one night. But I couldn't laugh. The humiliation and fear lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. Weeks passed and I tried to rebuild normalcy. Grocery runs, morning coffee, late-night drives with Maya, they all felt strained at first. I double-checked receipts, avoided aisles with poor visibility, and sometimes even pretended to check my phone while walking to the car, scanning for danger. Maya noticed. "You're not supposed to live like this forever," she said, frustrated. "I get that it shook you, but you can't let it control you." I nodded, trying to believe her. But trust in the world had cracked. I realized how fragile safety was, how quickly the mundane could become threatening. Even small gestures, checking locks, parking near lights, became rituals of survival rather than convenience. Eventually, we started visiting 7-Eleven again. Not the one where it happened, of course, but small victories felt significant, grabbing snacks without tension, laughing over soda flavors, letting the fluorescent lights be just lights again. It's been months since that night, but the memory lingers. I still flinch when someone approaches from behind, still check the aisles before reaching the counter. But I also learned something important. Life is unpredictable, and fear is often unavoidable, but control over our responses is not. Maya stayed by my side, grounding me, helping me see that even when the world twists unexpectedly, there's still safety in relationships built on trust, caution, and awareness. The night at 7-Eleven taught me humility, vigilance, and gratitude for the mundane moments we often take for granted. Life can throw unexpected dangers at anyone, even during ordinary moments. True safety comes not from fearlessness, but from awareness, preparation, and the support of those who care for you. Every incident, even traumatic, can teach resilience if we choose to learn from it. If you've never lived in a small town, it's hard to explain how quiet it can get at night. The kind of quiet that makes every sound, every creak of the floor, every bark in the distance, feel bigger than it should. Boonville, West Virginia, was that kind of town. Nothing ever really happened here, but it always felt like something could. The trees hung low over the back roads, their shadows long and crooked under the moonlight, and people learned to lock their doors even when they said they trusted their neighbors. I was 15 that September, old enough to want independence but still young enough to feel the world pressing in from all sides. My dad, Mark Lewis, worked long shifts at the sawmill, and my mom was gone by then, left when I was 10. It was just Dad, my little sister Ellie, and me in our old 2-story house on the edge of town. Ellie was 12, the kind of kid who still hummed when she brushed her teeth and thought the world was mostly good. I envied her for that. It was late on a Saturday night, September 23rd, 2023, when Dad decided we should make a quick run to the 7-Eleven. "We're out of milk, and Ellie wants those chocolate donuts for breakfast," he said, grabbing his keys. I didn't argue. Late-night drives had become our little family thing. The roads were empty, and for a few minutes, life felt simple. The 7-Eleven sat alone at the edge of the highway, surrounded by tall oaks that looked like black walls in the dark. Its neon sign buzzed and flickered, glowing orange and red against the night sky. The air smelled like gasoline and fried food, and the faint hum of a single streetlight filled the parking lot. Inside, it was the same as always, bright, cold, and a little lonely. The hum of refrigerators, the soft beeping of the soda machine, the faint smell of burnt coffee. I headed for the chips while Dad checked the cooler for milk. Ellie trailed behind me, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. That's when I saw him. He was standing near the snack aisle, tall, maybe mid-40s, with greasy hair that clung to his forehead. His clothes were wrinkled, his skin pale and tired-looking, and his eyes... God, his eyes. They followed us. Every time I looked up, he'd be there, pretending to study a bag of chips, pretending not to notice us, but always just close enough. "Dad?" I whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "That guy's been following us." Dad didn't even look up. "Relax, Harper. Just some guy. People wander around all the time." But I couldn't relax. Not with that feeling in my stomach. The one that tells you when something's wrong before your brain catches up. I tried to brush it off, focused on Ellie arguing about which donuts to buy, but when I turned again, he'd moved closer. 3 aisles away. 2. 1. By the time we reached the register, he was by the door, staring. I kept my eyes down as the cashier, a sleepy girl with purple hair and a nose ring, bagged our things. Her voice was soft and bored, like this was just another shift on just another night. When we stepped outside, the air felt heavier. I glanced at the trees across the lot. That's when I saw it, a shadow moving between them. Quick, deliberate, watching. "Dad," I started, but he just sighed. "Relax, kiddo. Probably someone heading home." He didn't see it, or maybe he didn't want to. We drove home, headlights cutting through the fog that had started to roll in. I stared out the window the whole time, half expecting to see headlights behind us. There were none. But that feeling, the one that crawled up your spine when you're being watched, didn't leave. That night, I lay awake long after everyone else was asleep, listening to the creak of the porch boards outside my window and the faint hum of the streetlight. I told myself it was nothing, but I didn't believe it. For a few days, I convinced myself it had all been in my head. School was the same. Life went on. But that feeling, that constant awareness, stuck around like an itch I couldn't scratch. It was Wednesday night when I saw him again. Dad was on a late shift, and Ellie had fallen asleep on the couch. I was in my room, scrolling through my phone, when the porch light flickered. I looked up, expecting to see a moth or maybe the wind shaking a branch. Instead, I saw movement by the driveway, slow, deliberate. At first, I thought it was a shadow cast by passing headlights. But there were no cars, just a man standing near the end of our gravel drive. My heart jumped. I blinked hard, and when I looked again, he was gone. I told myself it wasn't him. Couldn't be. But deep down, I already knew it was. When Dad got home, I told him everything. "He was outside," I said, voice shaking. "The man from 7-Eleven. Dad rubbed his face, exhaustion in his eyes. "You're spooking yourself, Harper. Probably a neighbor or a deer. We'll get motion lights if it'll make you feel better." I wanted to believe him, but fear has a way of making your thoughts louder than logic. That night, I kept the lamp on and stared at the window until dawn. 2 days later, the motion lights came. They flicked on randomly, mostly when raccoons came by. But one night, around 2 a.m., they flashed bright, too quick, too sharp. I got up, walked to the window and froze. The same greasy hair, the same face. He was standing at the edge of our yard, right where the trees began, staring. After that night, Dad called the sheriff. "Probably just a trespasser," the deputy said. "We'll patrol near your road for a bit." It didn't help. I stopped walking home from school. I checked locks 3 times a night. Even Ellie, who used to hum her way through chores, got quieter. Sometimes I'd catch her staring out the window like she expected to see something too. One Friday, Dad had to work late again. I tried to stay busy, homework, TV, anything. When the phone rang, I jumped so hard I nearly dropped my drink. It was Kyle, my best friend. "Hey, you okay?" he asked. "You sound weird." I told him everything, about the guy, the lights, the sheriff. He listened, then said, "I'll come by. You shouldn't be alone." When his headlights flashed in the driveway, I felt like I could finally breathe. But when I got in his car, he looked pale. "I think someone's been following me since I left," he muttered. Black sedan. No plates. We both turned to look. Nothing. Just the dark road stretching behind us. "Let's just drive," I said, voice low. We took the back roads, the ones that cut through the woods. But every time we turned a corner, I caught movement in the mirror. Headlights, far back but steady. The sedan kept its distance, never getting close, never dropping back. Just there, watching. We pulled into the old high school parking lot. The sedan stopped down the road. No one got out. "Call your dad," Kyle said. Before I could, the engine of the sedan roared. and it came straight for us. We barely had time to react before it swerved, lights flashing, then peeled off again, disappearing down the next road. We sat there breathing hard, hearts racing. "Let's get home," I whispered. When we pulled up to my house, Dad's truck was there. He'd come home early. The front door was open. The lights inside were flickering. "Dad?" I called, stepping in. He was standing in the kitchen, baseball bat in hand. "Someone tried the door," he said quietly. "Ran off when I flipped the lights." We called the sheriff again. They searched the yard, the woods. Nothing. Not a trace. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Every sound was amplified, every shadow suspect. But dawn came, and the world looked normal again. Sunlight pouring through trees, birds chirping like nothing had happened. It's been 4 years since that night. We never saw the man again. The police never found him. Sometimes I think he was just passing through. Sometimes I think he's still out there, watching different people, waiting for another quiet town to fall asleep. I still live in Boonville, though I moved into my own apartment near downtown. I lock my doors religiously. I don't run late-night errands. And I avoid that 7-Eleven like it's cursed. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving home from work, I catch a glimpse in my rearview mirror, a flash of headlights that don't belong. I tell myself it's just another car, another driver on a lonely road. But part of me still wonders if some fears don't fade. They just change shape. Danger doesn't always come crashing through the door. It often waits quietly, watching from the dark. Trust your instincts. They exist to protect you. The world may seem ordinary, but safety isn't promised, and fear isn't always paranoia. Sometimes listening to your gut can mean the difference between another ordinary night and the one that changes everything. I still remember the hum of Heathrow's terminal lights as we stepped off the plane, Anaya gripping my hand tighter than I expected. The city smelled different: damp stone, car exhaust, rain on concrete, and the air felt colder than Delhi ever had. At 42, moving halfway across the world was supposed to feel liberating, a fresh start, new opportunities. But standing there with my teenage daughter staring at me with wide eyes, I realized it wasn't just a move, it was survival. Our apartment in East London was small, with peeling paint, a radiator that wheezed like it might explode, and a single kitchen that doubled as living space. The boxes were stacked haphazardly in the corner, a chaotic reminder of a life left behind. My husband in Delhi, my younger son with his father, my past slowly dissolving. I had taken a job at 7-Eleven to cover bills, rent, and to give Anaya something resembling stability, though every shift felt like running a marathon with weights strapped to my chest. "Mom, will I ever see my friends again?" she asked that first evening, her voice a whisper over the sound of the radiator. I don't know, baby," I admitted. "We'll try, but right now we stick together. That's what matters." She nodded, though I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes. That fear became mine too. Each time she left the apartment, each time she walked into the world without me nearby, I promised myself I would always keep her close. But life has a way of testing promises. By December, the weeks had blurred. My shifts were long, sometimes brutal. Customers impatient, managers impatient, and the cold drizzle outside reminding me daily that we didn't belong here yet. I'd be exhausted, but Anaya was my anchor. Even a shared cup of tea during lunch break, a quick joke in the break room, a fleeting hug in the hallway, it was all we had. It kept the loneliness at bay, kept the fear at arm's length. Monday, December 11th, started like every other. Gray skies, drizzle, and a city that seemed indifferent to our struggle. I had just finished stocking the refrigerated section when I glanced at the clock. 1:00 p.m. Anaya should have been here for her lunch break 15 minutes ago. I waited in the break room, the lukewarm tea burning my tongue with bitter comfort. The muted television played some soap opera in the corner, But I wasn't watching. My mind kept going over every scenario. Maybe she got held up helping a coworker. Maybe she had a call from school. Maybe, God forbid, she'd wandered somewhere dangerous. Minutes ticked by, stretching my heartbeat and turning the warmth in my chest to ice. I sent her a text, no response. Called her phone, straight to voicemail. The anxiety began to curl around me, tightening like a noose. "Anaya, where are you?" I whispered, pacing the break room. Finally, I stepped out, scanning the aisles. Chips, drinks, microwaved meals, everything familiar, but now oppressive. Every shadow felt like it was moving just behind her. "Anaya!" I called, louder this time, my voice cracking against the hum of fluorescent lights. The cashier looked up nervously. A colleague whispered to another. The whispering made my chest tighten, like my panic was spilling over into the store itself. I ran aisle to aisle. Bathrooms, frozen foods, entrance. Nothing. Every second felt like hours. The mundane smells, coffee, disinfectant, microwaved food, twisted into something suffocating. I was shouting her name now, desperate, as customers glanced at me with curiosity or pity, but none offered help. Outside, the drizzle soaked my coat as I scanned the parking lot, heart hammering. "Anaya!" I screamed again. My voice was swallowed by the gray sky. Every car, every curb seemed suspicious, as though she could be anywhere or nowhere. The world shifted from routine to nightmare in the span of a heartbeat. The store, once a place of work and ordinary life, had become a labyrinth of fear. I ran back inside, calling for help. "She's missing, please, my daughter, has anyone seen her?" A coworker approached hesitantly. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is not okay. My daughter, Anaya, she's gone." I was shaking, tears starting to blur my vision. Every employee froze, unsure how to respond. I retraced her usual paths, thinking maybe she'd wandered off or gone into a quiet corner. I checked the bathrooms, the stockroom, the back entrance. Nothing. The fluorescent lights flickered faintly, throwing long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist as I moved. My hands trembled as I realized I had no control. Minutes stretched into an unbearable eternity. I imagined the worst. Cars speeding, strangers watching, accidents, kidnappers. Every scenario played in my mind, unbidden and relentless. My rational brain shouted at me to stay calm, but my body ignored it. The adrenaline made my legs tremble, my throat dry, my pulse deafening. Finally, I made my way back to the entrance. The street was empty. The drizzle had turned heavier, wetting the hem of my coat. I shouted again, but the sound felt swallowed by the city. I felt powerless in a way I hadn't known was possible. By the time my shift ended, Anaya hadn't returned. I stood under the dim streetlights outside the store, neon buzzing weakly behind me, the parking lot empty except for puddles reflecting the sky. Every sound, a distant car, footsteps on the wet sidewalk, felt amplified, like the city itself was mocking me. I held her phone in my hand, scrolling through missed messages. Each unanswered ping felt like a knife twisting in my chest. The cold bit at my cheeks, but I barely noticed. I was trapped in a bubble of fear, every nerve screaming that something terrible had happened. Eventually, I returned to the store to check again. Empty aisles, humming fridges, the smell of disinfectant and coffee. Familiar, yet haunted. Every corner seemed to whisper, "She could be here. She could be gone. You'll never know." Anaya returned later that evening, shaken but unharmed. She had gotten caught up talking to a friend on the street and lost track of time. Relief should have washed over me, but it didn't fully. The fear had planted itself deep inside me, a seed that would grow every time I felt responsible for her safety. That night I sat on the couch, Anaya curled beside me. I held her hand, feeling both warmth and the icy weight of terror I'd experienced. The store, the fluorescent lights, the parking lot. They would never feel ordinary again. Every safe place carries risk. Every familiar smell or light or sound could, in an instant, betray you. I learned that day that life is fragile. Safety is never guaranteed. Fear is real, and so is love. The two coexist in the same fragile bubble of our existence. And sometimes, even the smallest mistakes, like losing track of a teenager for a few minutes, can feel like the world collapsing. Life's ordinary moments can hide sudden danger, and even places we trust can betray us. True vigilance, awareness, and caring for loved ones are essential, but so is letting go of guilt and fear when situations are beyond our control. The measure of strength is not avoiding fear, but facing it with clarity and love. If you've ever worked at a convenience store early in the morning, you know how still it can feel. Like the world's paused somewhere between night and day. That's what I liked most about my shifts at 7-Eleven in Midtown Reno. Mornings were mine. Just the hum of the refrigerators, the smell of donuts, and the occasional regular stopping in for coffee. My name's Lila Harper. I was 22 that spring, barely out of college, still figuring life out. I'd moved to Reno the previous year because it was cheap and the job was steady. I didn't mind it. There was a rhythm to stocking shelves and scanning barcodes, something quiet and predictable. Caleb, my manager, worked the back office most mornings, counting inventory or running paperwork. He was the kind of guy who didn't talk much but made you feel safe just by being around. That Saturday morning, March 16th, 2024, started like every other. I opened the doors at 6, wiped down the counters, restocked the soda fridge, and put on a pot of coffee. By 10, the drizzle from the night before had stopped, and sunlight was spilling through the front windows, reflecting off puddles in the parking lot. The city was waking up slowly, cars passing by, the faint sound of a bus brake hissing down the block. I remember thinking how peaceful it all felt. I even texted my roommate, joking that nothing interesting ever happened in my life. Then around 10 o'clock, the bell over the door jingled and he walked in. He was tall, maybe late 30s, wearing a long brown coat that looked too heavy for the season. His hair was damp and he moved quick, too quick. He didn't look at me when I said good morning, just brushed past the counter and headed straight toward the back hallway where the bathroom was. Something about him put me on edge right away. Maybe it was the coat. Maybe it was the way his shoulders stayed stiff, like he was carrying tension under his skin. I told myself not to judge. Working retail teaches you to be polite no matter what kind of energy someone brings in. Still, as the minutes ticked by and he didn't come out, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. 5 minutes. 10. I wiped down the counter, pretending not to care, but my eyes kept drifting toward the hallway. Caleb was in the office, door cracked open, phone pressed to his ear. I thought about knocking, about saying something like, "Hey, there's a guy in the bathroom acting weird." But what would that sound like? Paranoid, probably. So I waited, tried to act normal, tried to ignore the prickling feeling crawling up my arms. When he finally came out, my stomach dropped. His face was pale, almost red around the eyes, like he'd been crying or sweating too much. He avoided my gaze, muttering something under his breath as he walked toward the coolers. I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke and something metallic, like pennies and oil. I tried to look busy behind the counter, but my heartbeat was too loud in my ears. Then I saw it. When he shifted his coat, the hem lifted slightly, and light caught something shiny underneath. A flash of metal. Small, but unmistakable. My breath caught. My first thought was, a gun. My second thought, don't panic. "Can I help you find something?" I asked, voice trembling despite my best effort. He stopped, turned toward me, eyes twitching like he was calculating something. "Bathroom's out of soap," he muttered. "Oh, sorry about that," I said. "I'll let my manager know." He leaned a little closer. "You alone here?" That question made my stomach twist. "No," I lied quickly. "My manager's right in the back." His jaw twitched. For a second, we just stood there, locked in this awful silence where I could hear the hum of the ceiling lights and my own pulse thudding like a drum. My right hand drifted under the counter toward the small, hidden panic button Caleb had shown me my first week. But I hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if I pressed it and looked ridiculous? Before I could decide, the office door creaked open. Caleb stepped out, holding a clipboard. "Everything okay here?" he asked, eyes flicking from me to the stranger. The man froze. His right hand, still half hidden in the coat, twitched slightly. Caleb noticed. He didn't move closer, but I saw his body shift subtly, like he was preparing to react if something happened. "Sir," Caleb said calmly, "if there's a problem, we can fix it. But I need you to step back from the counter." The man's breathing changed. Shallow, quick. His eyes darted from me to the exit, then back to Caleb. For a moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Then, he smirked. Just barely. "No problem," he said quietly. "Just needed to use the restroom." "Understood," Caleb replied evenly. "You're free to go." The man's eyes lingered on me one last time, like he wanted me to flinch. I didn't. I couldn't. I just stared back. He turned and walked out, pushing through the glass door so hard it rattled. The sound of it closing felt like air returning to the room. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped the rag I'd been holding. Caleb came around the counter, his voice low. "You did exactly what you should have. You stayed calm." "I almost hit the alarm," I said, my throat tight. "I thought he had a weapon." "You might have been right," he said, "but he's gone now." We stood there a long moment, neither of us talking, both listening to the quiet hum of the lights above us. I could still smell the metallic tang in the air, faint but sharp. When Caleb finally went back to the office, I pretended to keep cleaning. But my mind was stuck replaying the same image, the flash of metal under that coat, and the question that haunted me more than anything else. What if he'd stayed? The rest of that shift crawled by like time itself didn't want to move. Every sound made me jump. The door chime, the coffee machine gurgling, even the rustle of candy wrappers in the aisle. Caleb kept glancing up from the office, probably making sure I wasn't about to faint or run out the door. I tried to go back to normal, ringing up customers, refilling the donut rack, but normal had left the building right along with that man. Every face that came through the door looked suspicious now. Every shadow felt like it was watching me. When my shift ended, I changed out of my uniform in the cramped back room. My hands still trembled as I tied my hair up and shoved my phone into my bag. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at my reflection in the security mirror. My cheeks were pale, my eyes wide, and I looked like someone who'd just been told a secret she didn't want to keep. Caleb was waiting by the front counter when I came out. "You sure you're okay to walk home?" he asked. "Yeah," I lied. "It's only 10 minutes. He hesitated, his jaw working. "Keep your phone out, and if you see him again, anywhere, don't hesitate to call 911. Promise me that." I nodded, even though my chest was tight with fear. I stepped outside, the late morning air cool and bright. The world looked completely normal again, cars rolling by, people heading into the cafe next door, sunlight glinting off puddles. But I felt like I was walking through something fragile, like the whole city might crack if I breathed too hard. Halfway home, I caught myself glancing behind me every block. My mind kept replaying that metallic glint, the way he'd asked, "You alone here?" I couldn't tell if I was being paranoid or careful, but every shadow under the awnings, every man in a dark coat made my pulse spike. When I finally reached my apartment, I locked the door, then checked it twice just to be sure. My roommate Jenna was gone for the weekend, so the place was quiet. Too quiet. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the sink, realizing I'd never been this aware of how alone I could be. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face again, those twitching eyes, that faint smirk, and worse, the uncertainty. What if he really did have something under that coat? What if he'd come back? By Sunday, the unease had become something else. Anger. Not at him, but at how helpless I'd felt. I'd always told myself I was strong, independent, capable, but when it really mattered, I'd frozen. I'd hesitated to press that alarm, and that hesitation scared me more than the man did. On Monday morning before my next shift, I stopped by the police station, not to file a report exactly, but to ask if anyone had mentioned a man matching that description. They hadn't. The officer listened politely, wrote down a few notes, and told me, "You did the right thing staying calm. If you see him again, don't try to handle it yourself." I walked out of there realizing that sometimes the scariest part isn't what happens. It's not knowing what almost did. A week passed, and things slowly drifted back toward normal. Or at least, the kind of normal you pretend to have when your mind won't stop replaying one bad moment. Customers came and went. Caleb joked more, maybe to help me loosen up. I even laughed once or twice. But every morning, when I unlocked the glass doors and the bell jingled overhead, a small part of me braced for that same brown coat to appear again. He never did, but the fear didn't leave with him. It stayed quieter now, but steady, like background noise you can't turn off. One Thursday, a guy came in wearing a similar long coat, and I froze for half a second before realizing it wasn't him. The man noticed my reaction, gave me a confused smile, and walked off to grab coffee. I felt ridiculous, embarrassed even, but I couldn't shake the instinct. My body remembered before my brain did. That night after closing, I sat outside on the curb, sipping from a paper cup of gas station coffee, watching the streetlights shimmer on the wet pavement. Caleb joined me after locking the door. "You did good that day," he said suddenly. I laughed weakly. "Good?" I nearly panicked. "You stayed calm when it counted," he said. "You didn't provoke him, didn't freeze completely. You read the situation right. That's what kept it from turning bad." We sat there for a while in silence, just listening to the hum of the city at night. And I realized something. The fear hadn't destroyed me. It had changed me. I noticed more now. I trusted my gut. I didn't dismiss the voice in my head that whispered, "Something's off." That voice wasn't weakness. It was survival. When I got home that night, I looked at myself in the mirror again. The same face stared back, but I wasn't the same person. I understood now that safety isn't about where you are. It's about being aware, being ready, even when life feels routine. That Saturday, exactly a week after it happened, I opened the store again. The sun poured through the windows, glinting off the same counter, the same floors. The world hadn't changed, but I had, and that was enough. I never thought a job at 7-Eleven could feel like walking a tightrope, but there I was, balancing boredom, alertness, and anxiety in equal measure. My name's Dylan Hayes. I'm 21, and I'd recently been promoted from shelving and stocking to undercover loss prevention. To most people, that sounded glamorous, like I was some kind of secret agent. But in reality, it was exhausting. The store in Cedar Grove, New Jersey was tucked into a quiet residential stretch, sandwiched between a shuttered bakery and a small plaza. I liked its isolation. Fewer customers meant fewer distractions, and fewer distractions meant I could do my job without chaos. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly over the linoleum, and the air smelled of coffee, warm pizza, and cleaning solution. Sometimes a faint metallic tang lingered, and I never quite liked that smell. It made my skin crawl. That Thursday evening, I clocked in for my shift at 6 p.m., the sky a slate-gray drizzle outside. I greeted the clerk, stocked a few shelves, and walked through the aisles, scanning every customer with quiet attention. Loss prevention meant blending in, being invisible, but mentally ready for anything. Most nights, the scariest thing I'd encounter was a kid sneaking a candy bar, or an elderly woman trying to return something a little late. But that night, the air felt different. Tense, expectant. I didn't know it yet, but this would be a night I couldn't shake for years. I spotted her near the refrigerated drinks aisle. At first, I told myself she was just another customer, a pale, thin woman in a mobility scooter bundled in layers of sweaters like a snowstorm had just passed through. but there was something in the way she looked at me that sent an icy shock through my spine. Her eyes didn't flicker, don't dart like normal people's. They lingered, uncomfortably, deliberately, and the moment I turned my head away, it felt like she anticipated it, keeping me in her peripheral awareness. I swallowed hard and told myself to breathe. "Just a regular customer," I muttered, forcing a smile as I approached. "Excuse me, can I help you find anything?" Her head snapped toward me, eyes blazing, and she hissed. Not a normal hiss. Something low, feral. The kind of sound that vibrates in your chest and rattles your nerves. "I know what you're doing," she said, voice dripping with accusation and hatred. I froze, heart hammering. Her scooter lurched forward, deliberately ramming my legs. I stumbled back against the shelf, knocking over a display of bottled water. "Stop, police!" I shouted instinctively, trying to pin her as she thrashed. She was unnervingly strong, every movement precise and fast, yet somehow controlled. Customers turned, phones out, recording the chaos, but I barely noticed them. My adrenaline took over. For several minutes I wrestled with her, the metallic clatter of her scooter and the crash of products echoing through the store. Sweat ran down my forehead. My arms burned from holding her down, but I couldn't let go. I kept thinking, she could seriously hurt someone. The smell hit me then. Acrid, animalistic, metallic. It seemed to cling to her layers of sweaters and follow her movements. My stomach twisted. I realized then this wasn't a petty thief. This was something different, someone who had been pushed to a dangerous edge, and now I was the obstacle in her way. Finally, I managed to pin her to the floor long enough for the store clerk to call 911. The minutes stretched, each second etched into my memory. The fear wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Her eyes wide, unyielding, filled with a hatred I couldn't comprehend. When the police arrived, they restrained her and found small items hidden beneath her sweaters. Candy, toiletries, a few snacks. Not worth the violent struggle. But it wasn't the stolen items that haunted me. It was her certainty, her final whisper as they led her away. "You'll see me again." I sank into a chair after she was gone, shaking, trying to breathe. Every sound in the store, the hum of the fridges, the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights, distant traffic, was amplified, each one a reminder of what had just happened. That night I couldn't sleep. Every shadow in my apartment seemed alive, stretching and shifting like her movements in the aisles. Returning to work weeks later didn't help. Every unusual glance, every lingering customer made me tense. Even coworkers' casual movements set me on edge. I realized that danger doesn't always announce itself. It can hide behind the ordinary, waiting for a moment to strike, or simply to terrify. The fear wasn't rational, but it was real. It wasn't just the memory of her strength or her eyes. It was the idea that the mundane world could turn violent without warning, and there was little I could do to predict it. It took months for me to adjust to normal life again. I learned to read subtle cues, to trust instinct, and to respect that appearances can be deceiving. The store aisles, the fluorescent lights, even the simple act of greeting a customer, it all required a heightened awareness I hadn't needed before. I didn't blame her entirely. Something in her life had pushed her to the brink. But the experience taught me a truth I couldn't ignore. Ordinary moments can become dangerous. Safety is never guaranteed. Vigilance, preparation, and the ability to respond quickly matter more than any sense of routine or comfort. The memory of her eyes, her hiss, the feel of the scooter ramming into my legs, they remain with me. But they also remind me why awareness and presence matter. Life doesn't give warnings. It doesn't pause for preparation. It simply happens, and the strong, observant, and resilient survive. Danger often hides behind the ordinary, and the world is unpredictable. True safety comes not from ignoring risks, but from vigilance, awareness, and responding wisely to threats, even in the most mundane settings. Fear is inevitable, but preparedness and composure can turn panic into survival.